she on?
Hello?
Is it recording?
Yep.
All right.
Perf. Okay, so yeah, like I said, we're just going to talk about lamenting prayer/prayers. So just the basic definition, like you Google search, what is the definition of lament? And it is a passionate expression of, spelling error, of grief or sorrow. And then I looked it up, and I always like to look up the words in Hebrew and Greek. Just most of the time they're really similar to like what it already was, but I always just find it interesting because the Bible was written in Hebrew and Greek. So in Hebrew, lament is actually that little symbol there, in case y'all were interested. And it is, the definition of lament is an expression of loss, sometimes through artistic expression, which makes sense because a lot of the Psalms, there's like a lot of lamenting in the Psalms, and the Psalms is a very artistic expression. And then in Greek, it's the word thrynos, but that's how you write it in Greek. And it just means lament, lamentation, wail, weeping, plaint. So, and then, yeah, so then we kind of just have a question. I don't know, maybe you guys don't, but is there any other words that come to mind when you think of a lament? Perfect. Okay, so then also, just to kind of correlate lament in the Bible and its relevance in the Bible. Oh, wait, no. First, we're going to read this psalm. So if someone wants to read Psalm 102, verses 1 to 2, anyone can read it, any version.
I can do it.
Perf. Oh yeah, and all of the passages that we list are like examples of lamenting prayer. So,
Okay.
Examples of it.
Okay, got it. Okay. Lord, hear my prayer. Listen to my plea. Don't turn away from me in my time of distress. Bend down to listen and answer me quickly when I call to you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so that was just like an example of what a lamenting prayer could look like. So in terms of its relevance in the Bible, did you know that actually 1/3 of the Psalms are considered laments? So there's 150 Psalms, so around 50 of the Psalms are lamenting Psalms, which is kind of like, wow, to me when I look at that, I'm like, oh, thanks. When I look at that, I'm like, wow, like this is clearly something that God wanted in the Bible because it's so prevalent. I mean, there's a whole book called Lamentations, and also a lot of other books too, like Job is a lot of lamenting. And so to me, at least when I see that, I'm like, wow, like this means to me that God clearly wanted us to know this, because he very, very made it very apparent by putting it in multiple places. So then, yeah, so 2 questions here. You can answer one or the other, whatever, or both. What does that mean, like, to you, that like there's so like the relevance in the Bible? And also, do you think God wanted these included for a reason? And if so, why?
Okay, well, I can move on to the next slide. We're going to read from Job chapter 3. I have it open here, but if someone else wants to read, please go ahead. Okay, I'm going to do it. And I just wanted to, one of the things that I like about this study is we've kind of chosen some lamenting prayers that I think are good just for self-reflection. Like, I know it might not always be like, oh, this is like a really thought-provoking, like, let me talk about this, but rather, wow, let me really just rest in what these words are and what they're saying and what they mean to me today and what they meant to the people who were writing them. So that's something that I kind of want to maybe just challenge or encourage you guys to do. So Job 3, in my Bible, the title is Job's opening speech. And it reads this. After this, Job began to speak and cursed the day he was born. He said, "May the day I was born perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. If only the day had turned to darkness. May God above not care about it, or light shine on it. May darkness and gloom reclaim it, and a cloud settle over it. May what darkens the day terrify it. If only darkness had taken that night away. May it not appear among the days of the year or be listed in the calendar. Yes, may that night be barren. May not joyful shout be heard in it. Let those who curse days condemn it. Those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning stars grow dark. May it wait for daylight but have none. May it not see the breaking of dawn. For that night did not shout the doors of my mother's womb and hide sorrow from her eyes. Why was I not stillborn? Why didn't I die as I came from the womb? Why did the knees receive me, and why were there breasts for me to nurse? Now I would certainly be lying down in peace. I would be asleep. Then I would be at rest with the kings and counselors of the earth, who rebuilt ruined cities for themselves, or with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden like a miscarried child, like infants who never see daylight? There the wicked cease to make trouble, and there the weary find rest. The captives are completely at rest. They do not hear taskmaker's voice. Both small and great are there, and the slave is set free from his master. Why is light given to one who burdened with grief, and life to those whose existence is bitter, who wait for death? But it does not come, and search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with much joy, and are glad when they reach the grave. Why is life given to a man whose path is hidden, whom God has hedged in? I sigh when food is put before me, and my groans pour out like water. For the thing I feared has overtaken me, and what I dreaded has happened to me. I cannot relax or be calm. I have no rest, for turmoil has come. So that was the CSB version, just so you know, because that might sound a little bit different. But yeah, I just thought that was a really powerful passage, and also I think that can relate a lot to certain situations that I think a lot of people go through in life today, and seasons of life, and or mental illness, or just so many things. I think that's a good and a powerful words.
Yeah, and also too, sorry, I just want to say something. In my Bible, the like little title in my Bible, the ESV actually says like Job laments his birth, and just like seeing that like is so crazy to me, because like just the fact that like he was in literally so much sorrow and lament that he was like, I wish I was not alive, was just like, I think like Ava said, is very relevant to today. And like I think just interesting and really cool that God puts that in the Bible as like an example of how we can pray. Anyways.
Thanks, Em, for sharing that. Okay, so we're gonna go through two different, I think these got switched. Okay, whatever. We're gonna go through.
I think you went ahead too.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, lamenting in society. So we're gonna look at lamenting in society and lamenting in the Bible, and just how those contrast from one another, because I think it's a good reminder for us today as we kind of dive into lamenting and what that looks like. And I think lamenting is also such a daily thing, but we don't consider it, like we don't call it lamenting, but we actually lament a lot. So lamenting in society, when we lament in society, we often are seen as weak, vulnerable, complaining, annoying. There's this just get over it mentality, because putting our problems into the world doesn't really want to take it. The world has enough problems of its own. And as much as I think people are like, yes, like I'm here to listen to your problems, I think sometimes we rebuttal people's problems with our own problems. And God never does that. You bring your things to him. He's not like, yeah, girl, but I had it harder. Or, oh, yeah, that's great, but there was this time where I went through this. in the sense that he doesn't combat what we're going through with, or belittle what we're going through. I think we're reminded of this, the sacrifice that he made through it. So I don't want to glaze over that, because I think that's important, but rather, he doesn't rebuttal or do there's this saying, like, my dog's blacker, I think, where it's like, you say one thing and then someone's like, oh yeah, but my thing was worse, or oh yeah, but this was harder. So why do you think that this is the truth we find in society? Why is this such a common mindset when it comes to lamenting, or bringing up problems or struggles or times of despair? So another chapter from Job. If someone wants to turn to chapter 23 in Job, we'd love to hear you read from there.
Sure, I can do it. Then Job replied, "Even today my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say. No, would he oppose me with great power? No, he would not press charges against me. There an upright man could present his case before him, and I would be delivered forever from my judge. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. But he knows the way I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. But he stands alone, and who can oppose him? He does whatever he pleases. He carries out his decree against me, and many such plans he still has in store. That is why I'm terrified before him. When I think of all this, I fear him. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. Yet I am not silenced by the darkness, by the thick darkness that covers my face."
Thank you so much for reading. Yeah, just another good passage to let sit and rest and come back to if you feel prompted. So next, we're just going to look into lamenting in the Bible and the contrast that has in comparison to lamenting in society. So lamenting in the Bible, which is very different than lamenting in society, I think we're seen as strong and courageous, or even brave, for bringing forth those things to God. Faithful, relational strengthening, taking the time to work through it with Christ. And I really like that point, because I think it makes certain situations more real when we actually bring them to God in this way, because we can actualize what's happening with him in a desperate matter, or through our complaints or our frustration. That saying of "it's okay not to be okay," I think that's a really valuable statement in this circumstance. God's just like, bring it to me, it's okay, to be feeling this way. So I just want to prompt you with this question: how do these statements make you feel? And then if you also want to answer one or the other or both, do you feel encouraged by these words? And if so, in what ways? Sweet. So Emily Psalm 55. We can read from there if someone wants to turn to this psalm. And before whoever reads starts, one of the things that stood out to me, because I actually turned to the back of my Bible, and I don't know if all Bibles have this, but I think probably there's like you can look up a word and then it'll show you where to find it, like where to find verses that are like that. So I was looking up lamenting, but there wasn't any verses that pertain to just the word lament. So then I went to complaining, and it took me here. And I thought that this was just a very realistic circumstance of a lament to God and how we bring things forward, and just a very, I don't know, applicable situation. So whoever wants to read can go ahead.
I can read it. Okay. Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they drop trouble upon me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. And I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. Destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls, and iniquity and trouble are within it. Ruin is in its midst. Oppression and fraud do not depart from its marketplace. For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together. Within God's house we walked in the throng. Let death steal over them. Let them go down to Sheol alive, for evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart. But I call to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. God will give ear and humble them, he who is enthroned from of old, because they do not change and do not fear God. My companion stretched out his hand against his friends. He violated his covenant. His speech was smooth as butter, yet war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. But you, O God, will cast them down into the pit of destruction. Men of blood and treachery shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you.
Also, sorry, I know Emily, you're gonna go into the next part, but I love how that ends. Like he just goes on and on and on and on about all these things, and then he's like, "But I will trust in you." And I love the profoundness of that, because it's like it just roots it right back to who God is and who the plans that he has, and the process of how he um, uses us and uses circumstances to grow and transform us in certain ways. So I think from like looking at Job as an individual, or I guess this isn't Job, but just looking at the writer as someone and then relating yourself to them and going, yeah, like I've been there and I've said these things, but I think an appreciation for them as they write, and for them to be able to humbly say, yeah, like all these things, but I'll trust in you. Because I think sometimes we're like, all these things, but do what I want because I don't like what I'm in right now. So I just appreciated their words there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then our last kind of points on this lament and lamenting prayer is while we were preparing to like lead the study, I was reading just a few like blog posts that people had written, and this guy wrote this like really lengthy one about lamenting prayer. But one of the things that stuck out to me was he actually calls lamenting as like an act of faith. Yeah, and like just that was so cool to me, because I think a lot of the times people associate lamenting like with doubt, and like, oh, like you don't trust in God, like you don't, like you shouldn't lament because like that just shows like your unbelief in Christ. But yeah, like what it says, we don't always acknowledge that lamentations are because we care. It is in fact an act of faith, not an act of disbelief, because why else would we be feeling this way? Like, why else would we be feeling all this like sorrow and grief and all this stuff if we didn't care? If we didn't care, we wouldn't feel this way. We would just move on. But the fact, I think that like, you know, like reading some of like what these people have written and stuff, like these Psalms or just Job and stuff, and like just the sorrow that comes through their words of just like, you can't look at that person. And even though they say things like, where are you, God? Like, you know, and people might look at that and be like, oh, like you're doubting. But I think in a sense, sometimes when we doubt, it shows that we care, because we care enough to question. And like, it shows like when we question, like we want an answer because we want to care. And like our relationship with God is so important to us that we would rather express this out to him and like be like, God, like I just don't understand, like why is this happening to me, versus like bottling it in and being like, no, I got this, I'll just move on myself, you know. But it shows, I just thought that was really cool how like it actually is like a act of faith, and although it's not always viewed that way, that it actually is. And it's like, you care and this is why you're doing it. And yeah, and I just really think that's like a concept that's like not necessarily, especially in society, it's not necessarily seen as something like that, but in the church at least we can see it as like and like even in the Bible, like what Jess was saying, like having faith to lament and know that it's going to be okay. Yeah, I just really like that. But and kind of just, at least for me, put a new spin on like lamenting and what that looks like. So yeah, our last questions here, and yeah, you can answer one or the other or both. Do you find yourself being hesitant with lamenting to God? And the other one, what are some ways you could challenge yourself to open up to him in more / always in the coming weeks? Oh, okay, perfect. So the last one we're going to read is Psalm 22. So if someone wants to read that, I'm sure some of you have probably heard this. It's very popular and it's very foreshadowing of Christ on the cross, but it's also just an example of, lamenting. And I mean, as I say, like it's a foreshadowing of Christ on the cross, like Christ also lamented, as you can see in this psalm that is reflected later on. So if someone wants to give her a read, please feel free.
I can, if no one else wants to.
Go for it.
Okay. My God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you rescued them. They cried out to you and were saved. They trusted in you and were never disgraced. But I am a worm and not a man. I am scorned and despised by all. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads, saying, "Is this the one who relies on the Lord? Then let the Lord save him. If the Lord loves him so much, let the Lord rescue him." Yet you brought me safely from my mother's womb and led me to trust you at my mother's breast. I was thrust into your arms at my birth. You have been my God from the moment I was born. Do not stay so far from me, for trouble is near, and no one else can help me. My enemies surround me like a herd of bulls. Fierce bulls of Bashan have hemmed me in. Like lions, they open their jaws against me, roaring and tearing into their prey. My life is poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax melting within me. My strength has dried up like sun-baked clay. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You have laid me in the dust and left me for dead. My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs. An evil gang closes in on me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. My enemies stare at me and gloat. They divide my garments among themselves and throw dice for my clothing. O Lord, do not stay far away. You are my strength. Come quickly to my aid. Save me from the sword. Spare my precious life from these dogs. Snatch me from the lion's jaw and from the horns of these wild oxen. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you among your assembled people. Praise the Lord, all you who fear him. Honor him, all you descendants of Jacob. Show him reverence, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not ignored or belittled the suffering of the needy. He has not turned his back on them, but has listened to their cries for help. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will fulfill my vows in the presence of those who worship you. The poor will eat and be satisfied. All who seek the Lord will praise him. Their hearts will rejoice with everlasting joy. The whole earth will acknowledge the Lord and return to him. All the families of the nations will bow down before him, for royal power belongs to the Lord. He rules all the nations. Let the rich of the earth feast and worship, bow before him, all who are mortal. All whose lives will end as dust, our children will also serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of the Lord. His righteous acts will be told to those not yet born. They will hear about everything he has done.
Thanks, Jess. So that's kind of like the end of our little short presentation.